Hello and welcome back to Election Time News America. Today is Wednesday, June 11th, 2025, and we're going over the 2026 United States elections. They're still a while away, but there are still quite a few things that we can glean from what is most likely to happen during these elections, even though we are a year and a quarter out. Election Time News, your one stop for all things elections and politics, from summations to poll reviews and news. Subscribe below for more content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. And also make sure to follow the Substack that is linked below. Remember, there is never a dull moment in politics. So, even though we are just under 17 months out from the 2026 elections in the midterms, which is November 3rd, 2026, there's still quite a bit that we can figure out from these, also from the histories of these. So, first off, we do, of course, have the fact that typically the party that is out of power in the White House generally does pretty well. Even in 2022, the Democrats lost control of the House, for example. So there's typically a loss of seats. So most likely, as of right now, I would say that there is probably about a 75% chance that the Democrats will win back the House of Representatives in 2026. But of course, the Senate is a very uphill battle for the Democrats, which we will get to in a minute. But going back again to the House, the general congressional vote right now, the RCP average is 2.6. And so that's actually an overestimation of Democrats typically. If you look at 2024, the final RCP average was 0.3, and it ended up being Republicans plus 2.7. And for 2020, it was 6.8, and it ended up being 3.1. So those are both off by just enough that they would actually end up being net even. But if you then look at 2022, which was an underestimation of Democrats, then you actually have the final results being basically right on point here. So it was a reverse, it was a double negative sort of thing where people expected it to underestimate Republicans, and then it basically ended up not. So that was the problem with 2022, but this was pretty on point. So based on the last midterms, and if we even go to the midterms before that, they actually underestimated Democrats by a slight amount, 1.1%. So, if anything, for the midterms, we should actually expect these should basically be right on point for how the Democratic turnout and the overall thing. So, apparently, the midterms are relatively accurate. So, Democrats plus 2.6 nationwide. We can look at some of these PVIs and make some other guesstimations based on that as well. But the general ballot here, and if we actually look at in 2018 and also in 2022, if we take a look at what things were looking like at this point in time, of course, this is years out. So if we find some polls that are from much earlier, now we're back in the previous year. If we look at July, there we go, Quinnipiac, Democrats plus 1, Democrats plus 2, Republicans plus 1, Federalist Susquehanna, this was in August, Democrats plus 1. That is basically exactly what we are seeing now, plus 1, plus 2, plus 1, plus 2, Atlas Intel plus 9, which is insane, Fox News plus 7, which is insane, New York Times Siena plus 3, but then 3 plus 1s and a plus 2. So, and you have Republicans plus 2. So it's all sparsed in there. You do have quite a bit. So that appears to be right on track for what we had seen. And then in 2018, and look at all the data and go to the year prior, then we can find here that all throughout June, we had actually very high Democratic numbers, which was actually being underperformed right now on average. Democrats plus 10, plus 10, plus 3, plus 8. All throughout June. So, and looking in May, you have plus 12, plus 6, plus 16 for Quinnipiac, plus 2, plus 7, plus 11. So, quite a few of these are actually being underperformed right now. So, it appears that as of right now, 2026 is actually going to be right between 2022 and 2018. So, 2018 was a very strong blue wave year. The Democrats actually did very, very well that year, which we'll get to in a minute. So Starting off with the United States Senate. This is going to be an uphill battle for the Democrats. I probably would say there's about an 85 to 90% chance that the Republicans will hold on to the United States Senate come 2026. So if we look here at the how odds work here, so safe is the most secure rating. It's almost certain 95+% chance if we're talking about probabilities, or 10 or more points if we're talking about margins on a map. Then likely is pretty secure. An upset is in theory possible though. 80 to 95% chance, or 5 to just under 10 percentage points. An advantage exists but isn't strong would be a lean margin, 65 to 80% chance, or 2 to 5 points. A negligible advantage exists. This is tilt, or there's definitely some minor advantage, but it's very, very slim and would absolutely be surmountable. And that would be 55 to 65% chance, or under 2 points. And then toss up is only for probabilities. No advantage exists, and the lead is undeterminable and non existent, 50 to 55% chance for either party. So we look here, we can see that the main competitive states here are the exact same as the results in 2020. We have Georgia, which was just under 2 points, North Carolina just under 2, and Michigan just under 2, and actually Georgia was closer to 1. And then additionally, we are also looking at Maine. I was looking at Minnesota, New Hampshire, which is interesting because Jeanne Shaheen is retiring. As you can see on this map, it is dark blue. Also, the incumbent in Alabama is retiring. I believe he is running for governor of Alabama, if I remember correctly. And this is actually the candidate that actually, that flipped the seat from Jones, who actually won, Doug Jones, who actually won the seat in a special election in 2017. Very, very low turnout, 40.5%, which, interestingly enough, was actually an increase because Jeff Sessions literally just ran with it with no opposition. But Doug Jones did actually manage to win this seat, so in theory, the best case for Democrats will probably be him returning in 2026, if possible. Senator Tommy Tuberville is running for governor. So that is going to open up that seat, which in theory makes it a little bit closer and could tighten things up a bit. Then we're also looking at in Kentucky, that is Mitch McConnell's seat. He also retired as leader. John Thune is now leader, the Senate Majority Leader, the Republican leader of the Republicans in the Senate. He is going to be retiring that open seat there. That is going to be the seat in Illinois of Dick Durbin. He is a longtime incumbent. He's also retiring. And then you have Tina Smith in Minnesota. You have Gary Peters in Michigan, and you have Jeanne Shaheen in New Hampshire. Peters against John James, who is likely to run for governor of Maine, most likely, which would absolutely put up a fight there. He already gave Peters a run for his money there. Smith is retiring, and so that's generally an open seat. There's no real strong competitors there. And Jeanne Shaheen, who actually made this a very safe seat, is retiring, so now that's going to be a lot more competitive. Then you also have the unicorn of Susan Collins in Maine. She was expected to lose by almost double digits, and she ended up winning by 8.5 on the same ballot that Joe Biden won the state by almost double digits. So it's almost 20 points of split ticket voting. She is very popular there. She is running for re-election. So that's going to be another interesting one. So we also have the special elections in Ohio for filling the remainder of J.D. Vance's seat. There is an unelected incumbent there, as well as in Florida, the remainder for Marco Rubio's seat. There is another unelected incumbent. So first we're going to do the safe seats, which again are going to be 95+%. That is basically something that you could absolutely say with full certainty is going to go one way or the other. That's going to be Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Kansas, Tennessee, West Virginia. Now, there are a few here that are pretty certain, but because it is still a year and a half away, you can't say with full certainty that there is a 95% or more chance that they're going to go one way or the other. So it's just due to the general uncertainty of having a year left before the election. If anyone had even said that in, last March that Joe Biden wasn't going to be running against Donald Trump for the election in 2024, most people would be quite surprised by that. So there's a bit of there's a bit of margins here that still could show up for this, but then right after that is going to be likely. That's going to be anything from 80 to 95%. And that's going to be basically everything else that you'd expect here. Montana, the reason that's not safe is because John Tester is still there. He could run again. He's relatively well liked there. Nebraska, that is because of Dan Osborne. He ran a very strong campaign in 2024, and he actually had launched a committee to run, and he officially announced he is also running in 2026 as an independent already. So that is already off the ground against Pete Ricketts. He formed an exploratory committee, and he has already raised $41,500, which isn't that huge, but that is still relatively a strong show out there. And Ricketts was only beating Osborne by one in the one single poll that was done. It's a Democratic aligned pollster. It was a while ago, but still, that is relatively it's a relatively useful thing there. And this poll was commissioned by Osborne's exploratory campaign. That's what made him decide to potentially try to run. It's still going to completely come down to whether or not he decides to run or not. But just for that reason alone, it is likely, because even in a red wave year, Osborne came within 6 3/4 points of de-seating incumbent Deb Fischer. So that says enough in and of itself, almost, to have some uncertainty to say that yes, actually, we're gonna hold on that one. In Alabama, as I said, that one's going to be because that's going to be an open seat, and Dan Jones could come back. In theory, now it's very very low chance, and but the only reason that I'm putting this out at all is because he already was senator, so he's already won in Alabama. So that's the reason that I'm putting that down there at all. Kentucky, very popular incumbent governor Andy Beshear. Dallas for House districts. I'll get back to that in a minute. That's the wrong thing. Andy Beshear is is going to be term limited. He's term limited now. This is his second term. He's limited there, and his term will end in 2027. So he might want to jump back and become senator, especially if he's planning to run a campaign for president, which I think he said that he was looking into. So very popular there. He's won there twice. He won re-election by over 5 in the same state that a year later would then vote for Donald Trump by 30.5 percentage points. So that right there is 35% flip there. So that's a very strong show out. It's an open seat. So with all of that together, I think there's, in theory, a chance that it could end up going blue. That's going to be much closer to the 90% chance that's going to go red side. Mississippi, actually, purely just because of poor performances of the Republicans there. I mean, Heidi Smith just barely won by under 10 points here in 2020. Not necessarily that popular. Mike Espy wasn't even necessarily that strong of a candidate necessarily. It was just a poor year, and he's a former U.S. representative, nominee for U.S. Senate in 2018, so he already had statewide name recognition, but it's still a rough show out here. I mean, it's the fact that it ended up getting that close is enough in and of itself to just say that that could end up getting even closer. South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, I believe, actually is going to be facing some Republican. In theory, he could, but as of right now, probably not. But as of right now, he still could. But he's likely to win the. He's likely to win the nomination but that's still a low enough margin, being just over 10 points, that with the amount of time that's left, you just can't have too much certainty in any of it at this point in time. Then we go, and that's actually all of the likely Republican states. Next, we're going to do the safe Democrat states. This is literally just going to be Massachusetts. Then we also have Oregon, Colorado, which is very, very narrow, and then you move over to Delaware and Rhode Island. So this far out, again, there's way too much that can end up happening. New Mexico isn't that strong of a margin. Hickenlooper, the state is moving to the left, and Hickenlooper is pretty well liked, and so he said this is going to be his last campaign for Senate, which means he's probably going to retire before the 2032 cycle. But this is still enough that he should be able to easily carry himself to victory. Delaware, another strong state for the Democrats, 21.5 now, and Chris Coons has not officially said if he will run or not, but most likely he will. And then Massachusetts is Massachusetts, 33. It's really not that much of a contest. And then you get to Rhode Island, also 33. So none of those are expected to be anything even close to competitive whatsoever, even if there's a strong Republican candidate. Things could get closer, but they likely won't. Then you have New Mexico, Illinois, New Jersey, Virginia. So to start things off with New Mexico, Lujan isn't necessarily a very large name, which may actually end up helping him, but you do end up having the interesting thing is that Lujan actually underperformed Joe Biden in 2020, so that potentially is a sign that things could end up going poorly in his direction, but Dominici declined to run. Okay, so there's not much to say as far as that goes yet. There's not much of information. There's not even a Wikipedia page for it yet, but the race is still going to open up. But as of right now, he does have basically the default right there in New Jersey, Cory Booker. There's not expected to be much actual opposition to him at this point, so. But this could potentially be concerning with the huge drop in support. Again, I don't think that New Jersey is going to be competitive even in 2028. Those sorts of shifts generally are a one-time thing, if anything, and while it is a large shift, I think it was more of a one-time thing than just an overall shift. Some of it is not going to come back. I think it is going to regularly start being very, very close to 10 points, but I don't think it's going to become a swing state within by the next presidential election cycle. It's still going to be a very interesting state to watch, though. That is definitely for sure. And in Illinois, that's going to be the open seat. Dick Durbin retiring. Things are going to be a bit more interesting there. There's more possibilities here, so there's not really any. The lieutenant governor did announce her candidacy. But other than that, not really much has happened. So Robin Kelly and Rahav, out of respect, I'm not even going to try to say that name. I don't want to butcher it. Two representatives from the state have run, or are announcing that they are going to run for the Democratic primary. This is going to be the more competitive one. The only reason this isn't safe, though, is it has actually gone red before. Barack Obama's seat actually flipped red in 2010 and then flipped back blue in 2016. So if it's a strong enough red environment, it could absolutely flip. It probably won't, but it could. And then in Virginia, it's a bit weird. Mark Warner is not likely to lose re-election here, but it's in theory possible, and he could end up announcing he's going to retire. There's a long time left. He has not said whether he will run for election or not. So all of those together are the safe and likely states. So you can basically guarantee it will at least be 46, 43 by November 4th, 2026. Next, we're going to move to the lean states. These are going to be, for the Democrats, Minnesota, and New Hampshire. So Minnesota and New Hampshire are going to be pretty close, somewhat close seats here for the Democratic Party. Tina Smith retiring, 5.2% victory here. That's not very strong performance. Uh, and so Kamala Harris only won it by 4 points. But this state doesn't really go for. Oh, that's where Al Franken went. So this is actually the last time that the this is really gonna be all right. So Angie Craig and Peggy Flanagan have both announced their intention to run. Both of these are gonna be relatively strong candidates. Now they're gonna be very like insanely strong. And declared Royce White. So this is the potential problem here, though. Royce White was a relatively strong candidate. He actually did the absolute best against Amy Klobuchar of any candidate ever having gone against her. She won by 24 in 2018. She won by 35 in 2012 and 20 in 2006. And in 2024, she won by 15.7. So that's still a huge margin. But the fact that it got that close is already enough of a sign to say that he might be a very strong candidate and one that will be potentially difficult for either Craig or Flanagan to run against. Most likely, they're going to be the ones that are, one of them is going to get the nomination. I don't expect much of anyone else to get it. If anyone, it's probably going to be. If I had to guess, it's probably going to be Flanagan, just because I feel like she has a bit more name recognition. But I wouldn't be surprised if Angie Craig did end up getting it. But that's all primary stuff next year. New Hampshire is a very strong blue state most of the time, except for when they're electing governors, which we'll be getting to in a bit. Jean Shaheen obliterated Bryant Messner here, and so I won every single county in the state. Overperformed Joe Biden, getting double the margins that double the margin that he did. But now she's retiring, so this is going to be an open seat, and this is going to be slightly difficult, but declared is Chris Pappas, the 1st congressional district. He's not that weak of a candidate, but I wouldn't necessarily say he's very strong of a candidate either. So that's a slight difficulty there. But the main problem here for the Republicans is there's no real strong candidates. Kelly Ayotte said that she's not running. She got deseated by the other, can I forget who? Chris Sununu said he's not running. So that is another issue here for the Republicans. And I mean, Donald Trump even endorsed him, but Scott Brown isn't a very strong candidate, U.S. Senator from Massachusetts and nominee for the seat in 2014. He doesn't have much name recognition anymore, I don't believe. And none of these names are necessarily that strong here, so I guess best might be Matt Mowers because he actually has some official name recognition as he was the nominee for the 1st district and candidate in 2022. So that would potentially be the maybe Stepanek, but probably not. Either way, there's the main problem here is that there's no strong Republican challenger. So that's why this is going to be a lean blue seat for right now. It's going to be pretty close to the edge of lean. That's going to probably be close to around 70% chance. Not too huge of a margin there. Then we go into lean, and here we have quite a few for the Republicans. We have Alaska, Texas, Florida, Iowa, and Ohio. And that does get them to 51, which means that outright they are going to have the Senate majority. Starting off in Alaska, of course, this is a somewhat interesting state sometimes. This is the main thing, is sometimes their elections end up becoming a mess. And so based on that, it could, in theory, become very messy. Also with Mary Peltola or Tom Bigich. So those are the main reasons why this is only lean, is there's 2 very strong Democrats that could end up running. Hypothetical polling, Mary Peltola actually is beating Dan Sullivan. There's literally only one poll, 15% undecided, but Still, the fact that that's already there and the poll that was done had the incumbent losing is relatively concerning for any candidate, but it's Alaska. It went for Trump by double digits, so there's no real reason to think that it's going to start going blue anytime soon. Texas, this is an interesting story. John Cornyn is fighting some, actually having to fight some people in the primaries, especially Ken Paxton, state attorney general. So this is going to be the main primary to watch in 2026. Is going to be Cornyn versus Paxton for the seat here. The best thing for the Republicans would definitely be Cornyn actually holding the seat because Colin Allred actually polled ahead of Ken Paxton and only 2 points behind him in another poll. Meanwhile, and only Cornyn was beating O'Rourke by 3, Paxton by 4, but there's meanwhile Cornyn was beating Allred by 4. So Cornyn is the better candidate out of the two, performative wise, and so that's mainly going to be the main challenge here. Beto O'Rourke and Colin Allred might end up facing off in the primary here. It's going to completely depend on how things end up going over the next few years. If one of them potentially wants to run for governor, which would be a completely different story there, but it's still Texas. It shifted very hard to the right as Hispanic support for the Democratic Party collapsed. So it is going to stay that. And that's basically the exact same reason that Florida is lean red. And also just because it's an open, completely open seat. There's, of course, an unelected incumbent there, Ashley Moody. But there's a chance that there may be some challenge here. There's already a challenge. Jake Lang, who was actually in the January 6th U.S. Capitol attack, but so most likely he's not going to win that, and she's also the incumbent. And there's also a few other people who have also decided to run, so there's quite a lot going on here. But the Democrats have quite a few people on the ticket, but none of them are that strong, unfortunately, for the Democratic field here. So this is potentially going to start going downhill and going more towards likely territory if the Democrats don't find someone much stronger. Josh Whale, if he makes an announcement to run, he could do relatively well. He's the one that lost the Florida 6th congressional district by really not that much. He did pretty well. That was the seat that Mike Waltz held, and he only lost it by 14 when prior to that, Mike Waltz won by 33. He halved the margin. So he's probably a relatively strong candidate if he announces that he's going to run. I wouldn't be surprised if he did end up winning the primary, but that's basically the contingent entirely on that. And other than that, Democrats don't have many strong candidates at this point in time. Up in Ohio, this is the exact same story. This is J.D. Vance's seat that is obviously now vacated by him, and now John Husted was appointed by Governor Mike DeWine, who is term limited. We'll be getting that in a minute. And so in the Republican primary, basically just John Husted. Most likely he will not even be contested, so he'll be able to get up a bank here, which is going to be difficult for the Democrats to tip. But potential Sherrod Brown. And Tim Ryan declined, which means that this opens up the field for Sherrod Brown. The best case for Democrats would be for Sherrod Brown to run for senator and Tim Ryan to run for governor, because both of them have statewide recognition. They're both relatively well liked. They both performed pretty well. So here's the question. The interesting thing is also be that Tim Ryan would actually be running for the same Senate seat again, but Sherrod Brown running for this seat, he could absolutely win because he's won before and he barely lost in 2024. He only lost the seat to Bernie Moreno by 3.5 points. So if he were to run to get into the race, things would tighten up very, very quickly, and it'd at this point just be a pure toss-up if he announces that he'd run. But Since he hasn't, it is lean. It is a relatively red state. It shifted to over double digits for Trump in 2024. And in that same vein is the sister state of Iowa, which also had the exact same story, except it's not an open seat. Joni Ernst is the incumbent, and so there's not much to have to do there. But Republican primary, not much of an actual field here. I have no idea why Carrie Lake is on there. I don't think she's ever lived in Iowa. But anyway, Nathan Sage actually has done relatively well, interestingly enough. Hypothetical polling, I forget where it was, but even right there, I mean, the fact that she's barely winning against a generic Democrat is concerning. But I'm pretty sure there was a poll from somewhere that actually had Nathan Sage beating um, Joni Ernst. But again, it was a very, very high undecided percentage, which they almost always break for the candidate who has the same party as the state goes on the presidential level. They are the partisan voters. So that would basically end up going for Republicans, would be Joni Ernst. But again, it's just too far out. There's way too many candidates that are still not out there. Once you have a very full primary field, it's less likely that they're going to end up deciding to run because it's already a full field and there's not much of a chance they're going to end up actually winning if there's already 15 other people. But if there's only like five, then you can throw your name in the hat and there's a relatively good chance. So there's also more of a chance that more people will still be joining that field. So that's going to be a lean state for now. And now it is 51 to 45. 4 seats are left. These four are the main four that we're going to be watching this election season: Maine, Michigan, North Carolina, and Georgia. And the current holding is 2-2. Georgia and Michigan are Democratic. North Carolina and Maine are Republican. So looking at the seats, we can see that Maine is, of course, Susan Collins' seat. She has not officially announced that she is going to run for re-election, I do not believe, but yes, she has, of course, expressed interest. But the Democratic candidates, unfortunately, Jared Golden has declined to run. He is going to run for re-election in his House district, which we're going to be getting to. Janet Mills is the governor of Maine. This would probably be the best case scenario for the Democrats at this point, considering that Jared Golden has declined to run. But Janet Mills is the term limited governor. And so her running for this, she obviously already has won in Maine. She has statewide name recognition because she's the 8-year governor. Declared as Jordan Wood, Chief of Staff to U.S. Representative. I'm not sure this is going to be that strong of a candidate. The field definitely needs to come up and to life for the Democrats for any chance of winning this. So as of right now, this is going to be a tilt Republican seat up in Maine, just because there's no strong candidates. Now, if I had to pick like a percentage, is probably close to 60, 50, 55%, pretty close, just barely tilt. It is ridiculously close because it's a relatively blue-leaning state, but it's a very well-liked incumbent. So I could see this going either way at this point in time. Next up is going to be Michigan. It's going to be the exact opposite, tilt blue. It is still Michigan at heart, so I wouldn't be surprised. But John James, if he did end up running again, he did run against Gary Peters and lost, but he not before shaking things up quite a bit, and he does appear to be running again. Mike Rogers actually. I think that, yeah, it was for governor. So Mike Rogers actually is announced that he is going to run. So as of right now, he is easily going to cruise to that former U.S. representative from the 8th district, nominee for Senate in 2024. Who that would be a difficult thing because that gave Alyssa Slotkin a run for her money there. She only won by 19,000 votes out of that's 5.3 million cast. So that's definitely going to be a potential problem for whichever Democrat wins gets an open seat, and there's no real strong candidates here right now. We have the Wayne County Health Director, a state senator, U.S. representative from the 11th district, and another state representative. So there's not much here right now. Pete Buttigieg declined. Gary Peters retired. Gretchen Whitmer declined. And she also recently declined for a presidential run, so I think she's just potentially planning to retire from politics, potentially from all those threats that she's been getting, which is very unfortunate. but it really is just there's not much of a field here. And so we're just gonna have to go with the fact that it's a slightly blue state and that they currently have the market. But if Mike Rogers doesn't end up having any competition and is just basically able to just stack up on cash, then it's gonna absolutely drop to a pure toss up at this point in time. This is closer than Maine. So if Maine's probably close to about 60, Michigan's like 55 on the nose. North Carolina, we're looking at Tom Tillis's seat. This is another uh, incumbent that just barely held on. And if Cunningham hadn't had the cheating scandal, then absolutely could have won this potentially. And so this was really going to be a difficult uphill battle here for the Democrats. It's not going to, of course, be as steep as some other hopeful states like Ohio, Iowa, Florida, but it's still going to be tough to end up beating because, Tom Tillis is relatively well liked. He's more moderate, but there's also been challenges, especially if Lara Trump ends up running against him. This would be very interesting. Mark Robinson is not running. I don't think he'd even win anyway. Don Brown is challenging him, so I don't think that he's really going to get much of anywhere. But if Lara Trump ends up running, things could get very tight, and that could open things up for the Democratic primary because Roy Cooper, decision expected most likely this month. If Roy Cooper ends up running, then things are going to get very, very tight very, very quickly. Hypothetical polling actually already has Roy Cooper beating both people in every single one. Now, there's 10% undecided, 10%, 5%, 9%, 11%, but still, some of these are insane margins. That one's by 3, that one's by 2, that one's by 3, that one's by 1. So all of those are saying that Tom Tillis would lose, and some of those are relatively recent, though none of them are very, very recent. Some of them are relatively recent-ish. So it all comes down to whether or not he decides to run. If he does, then it's going to get very, very close, very, very quickly. And there's also a challenge there. So I'm going to leave this as toss-up right now just because there's way too much going on. But the Republicans do have a narrow advantage there, but I'd probably say it's maybe 52% chance. 52% chance the Republicans are going to hold on to that seat as of right now, just because there's been no official announcement from Roy Cooper. But if he does, then it's going to go to tilt blue. Just because, again, with the national environment and everything else going on, there's definitely a story here. So Jon Ossoff, here is the final competitive seat here. Jon Ossoff, he is the incumbent. He has a lot of cash on hand already, but the Republicans don't have much of a field right now. Brian Kemp, the governor, declined to run. That would have been very, very difficult for Ossoff to win. Marjorie Taylor Greene declined to run. That would have been very, very easy for Ossoff to win. So, Reagan-Box horse trainer, you have the insurance commissioner, and you have the U.S. representative. Most likely Buddy Carter is going to be the one to win this one. He's not that unpopular. So that's not really a tough seat there because of a lack of any real Republican field. I'm going to leave that as tilt blue for right now. So if I had to make a projection, nothing is going to change as of right now, which is very, very boring. But if anything, again, you have to say that's going to be toss-up as of right now. So there is the overall look for the Senate in 2026. A thorough look through. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe if you are not already. And make sure to watch the overview of the governors and then the House that I'm going to be coming out with over the next 2 days in order. So thank you all so much and have a fantastic rest of your day.